Good morning. Happy Friday. Want to talk today, do another kind of economics theme video to end the week here. And I want to talk today about the idea, the concept of austerity. I'm going to focus on this from a macroeconomic perspective. It can be applied microeconomically, but I'm going to kind of focus on the big picture stuff here. So austerity is the idea of tightening, the idea of drastically reducing government spending and thus shrinking the size of the government overall. As you can probably imagine, politicians hate this idea. You will rarely ever see politicians talk about austerity because, it shrinks the government. That's who they work for. That's where they get their money from. So obviously they don't want that to shrink. They want that to grow. They think the government is the answer to every problem. And it's obviously and clearly not. History has shown us this in a multitude of ways. I mean, I like to think of the government as having the opposite of a Midas touch. King Midas, everything he touched turned to gold. Everything the government touches, everything the government gets involved in turns to shit. There's a million examples of it. And, there should be no reason why we need to send more money to the government, and the government needs to spend more money. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, you can look up the 3 richest counties in the United States. They all surround Washington, D.C. They're taking the money that we send them, and they're just putting it in their own pockets. They use your money to fund the truth campaign to get people to quit smoking, yet they also use your money to subsidize farmers to grow tobacco. I mean, how much more inefficient can you get? And yet they want more? It's not sustainable. And they don't think about the long-term future. They don't care. They're going to be out of office by then. They need the votes now. They want to appease voters now, or maybe 2 years from now, or 4 years from now when they're seeking re-election. They're not looking at the long-term future. We have to look at the long-term future. If you want to have a family, if you do have a family, if you have children, grandchildren, austerity is the only way history has shown us to sustainably, long-term, solve all of these type of problems, this budget deficits, trade deficits. Austerity is the only way to do it. You have to save money. You have to be more economical. The last time that a government official recommended an austere policy was in 1920. President Warren Harding. 1920, probably no one's ever heard of it because it's called the Forgotten Depression of 1920. Well, why do you think it was forgotten? Because he implemented austerity and it was solved in 2 years. He cut the budget in half from 1920 to 1922. Tax rates were slashed all over the board because the government was shrank by 50%, so they don't need more. They don't need all that money from our taxes. And the national debt was cut by 1/3. I mean, the proof is in the pudding right there. Every single economic collapse we've had since then has been met with the opposite of austerity. It's been met with the government printing money and just giving it to us and making us feel better. Because printing money, when you have no money and someone hands you $1,000, well, it makes you feel good then. But after you've spent that $1,000, well, then you're back in the same shit boat. And it's actually more like they don't hand you $1,000. They hand you a credit card with $1,000 limit on it. And so it makes you feel good while you're spending that $1,000, but then you still got to pay it back later on. And we're just kicking the bucket down the road. We have to address this at some point before this gets, even more out of control. Greece is a very recent example of how austerity measures have been successful. Greece just paid off the last of the bailout that they were given by the EU, right? They shrunk their government spending, they shrank the government programs, they became more economical as a nation, and now they're digging themselves out. But Greece, unlike the United States, they cannot print euros to solve their problems. They can't give their country a credit card and say, go crazy with spending. America, that's our new way to deal with economic turmoil. Quantitative easing, printing money and giving it to people. It doesn't work. It just creates a worse and worse picture for the future. So, hope that makes sense. Let me know if you agree. And I guess I'll leave you with the question of, if you guys were president, you had to implement some austerity, what is the first area of government that you would cut? Let me know. Hope you guys have a great weekend.